Chapter 3. When the phone rang the next morning, I thought it was inside my skull. I opened one eye and looked at the clock. 11:30 a.m. I'd gotten home around 4. After Hank revived Cynthia, we had prevailed upon Detective Jenkins to postpone his interview with her with a promise that she would show up at the station the next day to answer questions. Hank gave her something to calm her down and help her sleep, and then we bundled her into a cab and took her to a friend's apartment in Chelsea. From there, I walked to a restaurant in Times Square where my friend Michael worked. It was a large establishment with an immense bar that required 3 bartenders. Even though the place was popular with tourists and with the bridge and tunnel crowd, the food was still excellent. I could always find a single seat in Michael's station, and he had a generous spillage allowance. All of this made it the perfect place to unwind alone in the crowd. When Michael's shift ended, we went to an after-hours club in the village and drank into the wee smalls while I told him of the evening's events. The phone rang again. The only way to stop the assault on my senses was to pick it up. I reached for the phone with one hand as I pulled a pillow over my head with the other, dragging the receiver under the covers, hoping somehow to protect myself from the onslaught of light and noise. So, I said. Zach? Zach, it's me, Cynthia. Detective Cleary called me. We're supposed to meet them at the police station at 1 o'clock. Okay, I said. Are you okay? Yeah. Late night. I'll see you there. Okay. I hung up and tried to come to grips with the fact that I was going to have to subject myself to the day. Slowly, I pulled the pillow and quilt away. My skin felt as though it had been peeled, every follicle a prickly point of irritation. Somehow I made it down the ladder from my loft bed and into the bathroom, stopping to set up the coffee. Once inside the shower stall, I stuck my head under a barrage of water as hot as I could stand. I stood under the deluge and thought about the events of the previous night. I have seen my share of dead people, even a few murder victims, but I had never had any personal connection with any of them, even one as tenuous as my link to Alex. I recalled Cynthia's talking of Alex's trouble with his family, his loss of a grip on his talent as an actor, his recent turn of bad luck. It was over now. If some cosmic design had been targeting him, it had taken its last and best shot. If it was instead some chain of chaos theory algorithms set in motion by the random appearance of a neutrino in a galaxy light years ago and away, it had achieved its final and irrefutable effect. I have no clearly defined philosophy on death, its purpose or lack thereof, nor do I have one on life. For most of mine, I sped down one track with all the purpose and power of a steam locomotive until one day, at one instant, for reasons that remain a mystery to me, I realized that I was giving no more thought to the purpose and goal of my journey than a train could have done. My awakening, depressing as it was, came at a time when I had a unique opportunity to get off that track. I took it. But whether I derailed myself or simply pulled into a switching station, I did not know. The moment seemed like an epiphany at the time, but how would it look through the reverse telescope of time? Perhaps for each of us, the defining moment, the defining act, is one that seems offhand and random when it occurs. When was the moment? What had been the choice that was the final link between Alex and his death? Was there only one? Can our destinies be traced to one point in time when a chance or a decision sets in motion the chain of events that lead us to our end? And where was I at this moment? Had I already unwittingly taken a step that predetermined my fate? I pondered these and other inane questions as the water washed away the effects of last night's excess. I finished my shower, the jackhammer in my head now somewhat muted. The coffee had finished brewing. I stood by the window to drink it and looked down onto the intersection of 75th Street and Columbus Avenue. I did this every morning to take the temperature of the city. It was a beautiful, crisp New York day, and the corner was busy. Rollerbladers sped toward the park, and young people smartly dressed for business walked quickly and talked intensely. A pair of lovers window shopped. Another couple pushed a baby carriage. A man was having an argument with a mailbox. I recalled, as I often did, a remark made by a friend visiting from a small Midwestern town. If all these people are out on the street, who's doing the work? I had explained that in New York City, there are so many people crammed into such a small space. We have to eat, sleep, work, and do everything else in shifts. Coffee finished, I grabbed my black jeans off the chair where I had left them the night before. I put on my Doc Martens, a logo t-shirt, a frayed gray sweater, and my leather coat. Now that I didn't have to wear the litigator's uniform, I'd reverted to the clothes I wore in college, even high school. At times I look with envy at my friends who, with no apparent effort and without drawing undue attention to themselves, dress as if they are appearing in a GQ spread. I don't know if it's laziness or lack of personality that prevents me from following their lead, but I disdain people who have such a definitive style. If you wear the up-to-the-minute clothes, don't you have to drive the latest car and sit on chic furniture in a stylish apartment in the hottest neighborhood? And when the style changes, as it frequently does, don't you have to buy new clothes, trade in your car, sell your furniture, and move? It just takes too much time and effort. But more than that, I think I enjoy the anonymity. I want people to have to spend time with me before they can draw a bead on what I think about anything. I made a few phone calls, grabbed my wallet, checked it for cash, and left my apartment. In the hall, I bumped into my neighbor, George, who was struggling with the topmost of the 3 locks on his door. He was closing in on 80. Bent over with his face 2 inches from the door jamb, he was trying to fit the key into the slot, but he wasn't getting it anywhere near the hole in the security plate. George, let me help you with that. He jumped when he felt my hand on his shoulder. He's hard of hearing. Oh, Jesus, he said, turning around. Oh, Zach, oh, oi. He put his hand on his heart. He's very melodramatic. Oi, Zach, I'm glad you're home. I wanted to talk to you. Could you get the locksmith in here to fix this thing? I keep telling you, it's sticking all the time. George, I keep telling you, it's your lock. The building provides the lock on the door handle, I pointed, and the one above that, I pointed again. But any other locks that you install are your responsibility. I spoke loudly and with much emphasis so that he could hear and understand. And I told you I didn't install this one. It was on the door when I moved in. I know. It was installed by a previous tenant, but you don't have to use it. The building provides you with the 2 locks. If you want to use the 3rd one or a 4th or a 5th, that's fine, but it's your problem. I'm sorry, but if I start to maintain that lock, then every tenant is going to want another lock, and those guys at RealCore are going to start looking at me cross-eyed when I start bringing in receipts for all kinds of locks when they've already got two good ones on every door. All right, it was worth a try. He looked at me cannily, and I wondered again how much of the deaf and doddering thing was an act. You know, it's not so easy to pull the wool over your eyes as it was with Mrs. Jacobson. Things have changed since you took over. Yeah, I know, George, but first of all, I don't believe for a second that you ever tried to take advantage of her. You only try to take advantage of me because now the building is owned by a big corporation. You figure who's to hurt. But you're wrong, George, I'm telling you, because this is my livelihood here, and those guys watch me like a hawk. They've got little teeny accountant men with big, thick glasses and no hearts who double-check every receipt I bring in. And if I don't keep the numbers down, I'm pounding the pavement looking for another job with no reference from this one. And secondly, things have changed around here. They've changed for the better. Did Mrs. Jacobson keep the place as neat and clean as I do? And did she personally go buy a can of WD-40 like I'm going to do right after my lunch and come spritz your lock for you on the very same day that you complained about it? Ah, thank you, thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. You're the best manager this building has ever had. I'm the only manager this building has ever had, I said from halfway down the stairs. And that's why you're the best, he shouted after me. He laughed and shut his door. Two of the locks snicked into place, and then I heard the third one catch a few times. I paused on the third floor landing and finally heard a muffled, "Ah, Bоже mой," from behind the door. I laughed and headed down one more flight, past the second floor apartment, through the front door and down the stoop to the sidewalk. I waved at Mrs. Pooey through the front window of Pooey's Chinese Laundry, which takes up the ground floor of my building. She waved back over the shoulder of the fat woman who was picking up a large bundle of shirts wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. She was speaking loudly in the strange combination of Cantonese and Pidgin English that she and her husband used to communicate with their clientele. I laughed to myself, as I always did when I heard it. They'd had me to dinner in their tiny apartment behind the laundry shortly after I took over the building. The food made every Chinese meal I had ever eaten before taste like McDonald's, but they had spoken perfect, nearly unaccented English. They told me their fluency was bad for business, and so they had maintained the fiction for many years. As I headed down the block, I again admired their perseverance and good spirits, which were always apparent. It still amazed me that a cardiothoracic surgeon and a history professor could have survived such terrors, do what they were doing, and still maintain a positive attitude and an obviously healthy marriage. It made me feel like a schmuck for ever worrying about anything. I turned right down Columbus into the crisp October breeze, passing children dressed as goblins and superheroes on their way to school pageants. The air had a peculiar redolence of dog shit and freshly baked bagels. In other words, it smelled like New York. But underneath, if you were a native and you were paying attention, it smelled like winter coming on. I could feel the city gearing up for the marathon of commerce that begins with Halloween and lasts like some retail triathlon through Hanukkah and Christmas, with a last belated gasp at Valentine's Day thrown in for good measure. Thoughts of Hanukkah coming on reminded me of the High Holy Days just past. An empty chamber opened in my chest, and I heard the hollow receding echo of footsteps. I quickly slammed the door shut on images of my family, bent my head into the wind, and quickened my pace. It was time to meet Cynthia and face Jenkins and Cleary.